Hey, we're not going to be visible, right? We are?
Yeah, I can move you to attendee if you want.
Oh, it's all right. Well, I mean, I was coming just to observe. The Parks Commission is still in process of creating their goals. So I'll just turn my camera off.
Yeah, either way, I can move you to attendee if that's easier. But
I'll just turn my camera off. If you need me, I'll be here.
okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Paula.
Hey.
Hey.
It just seems like we were just in a meeting together.
No, we got to stop meeting like this, Ralph. Really? The computer's going to talk. I say Adam got a break from meeting with me today. Only had one.
Yeah, only one time today. Good. That's
Did I join in the right place?
yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, you're good. No, the I think at least how I thought we were going to roll, and we'll see, was having all the department heads, all of us together, and kind of how we Q&A this thing, and I think council was on the same. Hopefully, we're not on two parallel Zoom worlds.
Ralph, Brent has been awesome, by the way. We've been chatting pretty regularly, and he is very good at educating me on things, and I just wanted to give him a little shout out.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, his friendship and I have really grown a lot, and I'm glad as he's the union president right now. I don't know that I'd make it through this.
Well, you've got yourself a good person there for sure. So
Awesome. Thank you very much. I'll let him know.
got him there.
Hi, guys.
Hey, Sean.
Hi, Paula Hyatt.
Hello, Mr. Moran. How are you?
All of a sudden, you just showed up. I was like, whoa.
I can be frightening sometimes. I know.
Oh, as charming as always. I was. Paula, have you spoken with Stephen or Martin at all?
I got that email from them. Ran into Steven because he doesn't live far from me, but we haven't had a chance to have an in-depth. So I need to go
Yeah.
back to them.
Okay. Let me know if you hear anything. Yeah.
I sure will.
Yeah, man. Sun in my eyes, big time. Whew. Oh, wow.
Julie or others, I'm not sure if Steph got in contact with anyone. She had earlier in the week at least had said she wasn't totally sure she could make it. I don't know if anybody heard any updates.
I think that Gary, you spoke to her, right?
Unmuting, yes. I'm sorry.
The question was whether Stephanie was going to be able to be here, and you said you had spoken to her.
I spoke to her yesterday, and she was certainly planning to be here tomorrow. But we didn't
Tomorrow,
really
but
say
maybe
anything about
today.
today.
Okay. I'm not totally sure.
Anyhow, hello, everyone.
So
I'm currently feeling a lot of jealousy for Bill Molnar's setup. It's like, looks really good. The light's impeccable. The scene is like perfectly framed. It's like nicely organized. I still have
try.
I got modem issues. I got wireless internet issues. I got light coming from 15 directions. It's all bad.
Hey, if they could screw up the Golden Globes on Sunday, why should we worry?
I got a pains to have like the right 3-point lighting, and then it's like all of a sudden, a giant blast of sunlight, which is lovely to have, comes through the kitchen window and shot. It's all over. Start over. Oh well.
It's 5 o'clock. Shall we start?
Well, that's a good point, Sean. It is 5 o'clock. It ain't it's not my show, so I'm leaving it to Mr. Gary Anderson to lead us.
Not today, tomorrow. Today is Adam's, I believe.
Oh, it's Adam's show. Okay.
Yeah, today is tasks and schedules and calendars and obligations.
Sounds like a rock and roll song in some odd alternate universe.
So it is an official meeting though of council, so we probably do the startup stuff. Mayor Akins with you, and have Melissa do roll, and then if you want, I can take it from there.
Okay, thank you very much. I apologize. All right, so let's go for it. It is 5:04. It is March 4th. This is an official meeting of goal setting for council and staff to look at what we have on our plate coming forward and how we want to manage our tasks. And so I guess I will ask Melissa, if you don't mind, can you please call roll?
Mayor Akins,
Here.
Councilor Hyatt,
Here.
Graham,
Here.
Moran,
Here.
Steppinger, Duquesne,
Here.
Jensen.
Here.
Okay, so we are all present, and we have staff in the waiting to talk to us about staff priorities and our regulatory duties in order to set our calendars going forward. And I imagine there will be an opportunity for counselors to ask questions about staff presentations and how we want to sync up our calendars with our goals. And I think it would be important, if I can put in a plug, I think it would be important to leave room so that individual counselors can ask questions and get clarity around the priorities and sync those up with the goals that each counselor and the council as a whole may have. So I hope that we will leave room for that, so we don't just take up all the time in specific presentations, but have Q&A here, as this is meant to be a working calendar and a fluid fluid process. So with that plug put in place, I will turn it over to City Manager Pro Tem Adam Hanks for his leadership in going forward and calling on staff, if I may.
Okay, thank you. So this session, we've talked about kind of different variations of how we wanted to go about this, and I'm not sure that we've completely hit the mark for everyone, but I think what I'll try and do is go through what we have put together. I would say it's very much a working document. It's an expansion of the kind of normal document we use for tracking for the look ahead. That is kind of I'm not sure who coined that or who labeled that way back in the day, but it's the look ahead. It's what we use to look at upcoming council agendas and activities. The city staff obviously have a whole lot of things that operationally don't make that list. And many of the things that are on that list they might show up multiple times, first reading, second reading, in a study session first, and then moving into formal business meetings. And some hit at once and then create a bunch of work for staff after. So there's a whole different, there's a lot of different categories for them. And so it was a little bit of a challenge. I was trying to figure out how best to lay it out. And I tried kind of a horizontal thing, and it became unwieldy really quick. It sounded good in my head, but didn't really look right when I put it together. So I didn't think it'd be super helpful for everyone. So what we ended up doing, and this is, like I said, it's a working document. I think after this process tonight and tomorrow night, with some input, from everyone, both on the actual items and on maybe how we want to display it and make it useful for everyone. I can, do some more work. All of us can kind of clean it up and turn it into something that maybe is, an ongoing usable tool rather than just a display for tonight's purposes. But it is very much a working document off of a shared spreadsheet. So what I think hopefully works the best is I'll go through. I've taken with Elizabeth's help and all department heads, we've kind of taken the regular look ahead and expanded it a little bit. So from now through roughly through the end of the fiscal year, we kind of have a good sense of usually the next 2 to 3 to 4 months of work out in front. We can peg those pretty close to, it's a plus or minus a meeting slot or two, but we do have those pretty well figured out. We have to juggle based on things that show up. But so I'll go through that, and I've highlighted some that I think are more kind of larger, impactful things that might be worth some conversation as we go through them, just so everybody understands what they are. There's a bunch of things in the list that are a proclamation or something that I'm doubtful we'll need to bother talking about. But we can. We don't need to limit to the things I've highlighted. And then after July, we have a list that department heads have put together that is not complete and conclusive list, but it's a good chunk of what we don't have plugged in for specific dates yet that I think are of interest to council to kind of see what's coming. And really the work, it might end up being more of an exercise after tomorrow night, after listening to council's work, is to then compile the combo to really fill out the scheduling and then prioritization. So we may be really short. I may have thought in my head that we would get a lot more of that prioritization kind of work of our list done tonight. I doubt it, actually, as I look at it, and I actually doubt that would be necessary. I think it's better to wait. So with that, and then in terms of department heads, we have everybody, most everybody here, and actually Michael, as you see, Michael Black, this is more of a city part, not a parks exercise, but a lot of things crisscross, and Michael is a part of our department head management team. So he's listening and ready to jump in as needed. They're going through their goal setting as well. And obviously we have a lot of things that overlap, but a lot of things that are separate. So Michael has agreed to hang out with us too in case we need him. So appreciate that. And for the rest of the department heads, I'm going to try and be a little bit of an MC, I guess, and then have department heads either jump in to add to what I say or take over a few of the topics, and then obviously can answer questions that counselors may have better than I on certain topics. So if that's good with everybody, I can share the screen and get going, or if there's anything we want to chat about before we dig in. All good. All right. I will get the screen share going. All right. So this is the familiar format and look of the look ahead. We have, this is all of the items that are come up in the very next meeting are right here. Just as a process reminder, all of those items, all the packet materials, council communications, all of the things that go along with that for that meeting are actually, we're technically due end of day today. So that's kind of our cycle, the timing of things. So for things to be able to be reviewed back and forth, making sure that the attachments are correct, all of the content is there. And then I review and we chat, and then the agenda gets put together and finalized on the following Tuesday. Packets go out Wednesday or Thursday, then the meetings are the following Monday, Tuesday. So that's just the kind of the production cycle of all of this stuff. But so I've highlighted ones that I think are larger, more significant projects that, and some of which in these early meetings, we've talked about these already. So they may not need a whole lot of discussion, but what my thought was, and again, correct me if you want to go at it a different way, but just to go through and hit some of these from here through the end of the fiscal year, and then we'll flop over to another tab that are kind of grouped by departments that each department head could kind of run through their own, and then ad lib any more that they want to throw in there based on questions or things that pop into their head. So this first highlighted one, the residential uses and commercial building space. I did talk about this one just Tuesday night, and this one is primarily our community development department, and it will ultimately involve. This is an approval from council to have us work on it and have it go through the planning commission process, which requires a recommendation from the planning commission and then a ordinance first and second reading from council. So that one, again, it's hard to figure out how best to display that, but this will show up to you. This starts here, but will show up, as a council workflow item in June and likely July. So, and again, I'm going to try and show these later after we're done. I'm going to play with some formatting some more, and we'll clearly take suggestions about how to give council and the general public an idea about where all these things land. So we see how packed various weeks and kind of quarters and seasons are for everyone, for staff and for council. And again, this is really a list of the things that hit council, not necessarily all the operational things that departments do. The second one I highlighted was the CIP, and that was a holdover that was on Tuesday's agenda. That one is significant, and I'll mention that a lot of the things on the future date list page that we'll get to after this doesn't include very much from Public Works, and it's not at all because Public Works isn't doing work. It's because most of their stuff is inside the CIP. So when we go through the CIP, that's really the spot for a really large chunk of the Public Works Department's efforts, and all of those CIP projects, as we talked about, have multiple times where they will show up in front of council at different stages in their design and the contract approvals and all of that. So that's if we tried to overlay all of the CIP elements that come to council along with this other stuff, I think we would blow this thing out and it wouldn't be very usable. So the CIP is its own animal a little bit. So I'm not sure why that one is a different color, but obviously the city manager recruitment is going to show up a number of times as we step through that process, and and we've been keeping you up to date on how that will roll. That is at minimum a 4-month process. It could be longer depending upon a variety of factors, but that one definitely has a good deal of council involvement. The ones that are on purpose in green are the budget meetings. So they look kind of innocuous and occasional on this list, but these are a huge load of work for everyone, council, staff, and budget committee included. So those are just highlighted in that color to let us know that that's coming. End of the month is the kickoff, an intro, and then as you see down as we roll through the way we have it structured, the governmental funds as a full meeting, the enterprise funds as another meeting, and the recommendation for adoption as the final meeting. So 4 scheduled budget committee meetings, and really, as we've talked about in prior, less organized by department and more by fund, and really in the 2 very different types of funds being governmental funds and then our enterprise operating utility funds. I think those are packaged well, because they get reviewed and looked at and they function differently. So these 2, the ones in blue are just the 2 that are CIP related, that are just already scheduled and already sitting here. So I thought I'd leave them on. And this is the water treatment plant. Scott will be bringing forward an update to the both the costing and the scope of the Envision program that was requested by council, which is the more of the sustainability. It's kind of the infrastructure version of LEED, a certification process for energy efficiency, solar, and other sustainability related elements of a project. And so council will have a better sense of that. And then I might stop right there, and Scott, maybe if you could chime in and give a clue on kind of the next steps for the water treatment plant in general. I didn't, some of this is going to be ad lib, so sorry. We didn't talk about this prior, but I think the timing might be good to just give just a really brief synopsis of, because obviously that's a large project, large interest in public and council, and has already been on our plates for a while, and it's kind of crossing over councils here. So maybe a real high level review of where we think that one is going to lay out.
So my intent past the Envision kind of status update is to give more of a comprehensive update of the whole project itself, maybe provide a little bit more background, start to finish, where we're at currently with the project and the overall next steps required in the project itself. We've been, what I'll say is generally in a soft pause due to the pandemic and, the concern over rates and, other issues associated with the plant and the questions that have been raised by the council and the community regarding the sizing. So we have additional information that we put together on sizing optimization for the plant, some additional information on permitting requirements between the city and the Forest Service, the options, potential options for the Envision program, moving it from silver to platinum, and what that means as far as costing and programmatic element requirements to move it up to that level associated with the whole plant. We'll break down a little bit of the value engineering on the kind of the second phase that's occurred between 30 and 60% design. So it'll be, I'm hoping to have a pretty comprehensive update and provide that to the council and the community, and then answer any questions moving forward as far as the project goes.
Great. Okay. Thanks for the added info. So rolling into the second half of April here, this is we have 5 union bargaining groups, and we only have one that we are going to be negotiating with this spring and hopefully finish it up before the end of the fiscal year, and that's with our Ashland Police Association, and that again doesn't have a tremendous amount of workload on the council side. You do have several check-ins typically from us about giving us your direction on scope, and then we give you updates as those go. when we have meaningful, significant updates to provide. And then we clearly bring it to council with a proposed agreement. And it's a lot of work shared by both Tina and Dave to do the heavy lifting with a lot of background work from Melanie and her staff and finance to cost out things and really truth out all of the proposals that fly back and forth. So you'll see in the next, when we get to the past this fiscal year, we have 4 union negotiations for the following year. So we only have 1 this year, but for the other year we have a combination of 2-year and 3-year agreements that happen to land. I'm not sure if we've done 4 in a year ever. So that's going to be significant. That is a significant workload for the following fiscal year.
Pro Tem Hanks, may I ask a question?
Sure.
I was wondering who represents the city in these negotiations with the union?
That is Tina Gray and Dave Lohman. So our HR and legal department. And then my role, I'm not in the negotiation at the table, but the city manager then collaborates and we jointly make in negotiation tactical and strategy decisions.
And who does that?
That's the combination of that as a city manager with the HR director and the city attorney.
Okay.
Could I just add there, if we're not able to reach agreement and we end up going into mediation and arbitration, sometimes it makes sense to hire outside legal help to deal with those more complicated negotiations that can get very extended and very arcane.
Okay, thank you.
And I think we have done that on occasion. Next item down is one that's been on just Tuesday night's discussion, and this one is it's the ordinance, the commission ordinance, and council provided dialogue, discussion, and direction to Dave to help craft that ordinance. I'm not sure if Dave has seen where I just slotted this on the look ahead. We're looking at a target for that. So we can have that in front of you. And as we said Tuesday night, the goal when we do bring an ordinance is to have it in a format that is at that hopefully 90% mark that we have buttoned up most of that, because it's very challenging to kind of start with an ordinance at a 50% level and have all kinds of edits and go through that process. So hopefully we've got it to a spot where we can bring you a pretty tight looking ordinance and get you moving there.
Adam, got a quick question.
Sure.
In the development of this social equity ordinance, Dave, would individual councilors have input prior to this touch point that Adam is discussing now, or do we wait for your presentation and then that's the point at which councilors have input? What do you prefer? What's the most efficient and effective?
Well, I think it can work either way. I need to be careful as I hear from individual councilors to make sure that I'm not just responding to one councilor, because it's the full council that has to end up approving this. But input along the way from individual councilors that might help me sort of see where the totality of the council is likely to end up would actually be helpful. But just so we don't have erroneous expectations, just because one councilor says this is what I would like to see, of course, doesn't mean that's what the draft ordinance will reflect.
And again, that was our intended objective for Tuesday night's discussion was to, and I think we've accomplished a good amount of that, of narrowing down some of the questions from that 15 down. And but if council is interested in having another discussion about that prior to an ordinance, coming, that's a council, that's a council decision that you could make, and we could incorporate that into a schedule.
Thank you.
So the next one is the food and beverage tax allocation ordinance. And we've talked about this one several times, and it was actually on an agenda and then kind of got kicked forward. And the immediate issue there was the wastewater debt, the wastewater treatment plant debt, and council made that decision to go ahead and pay off that debt early. We need to, there's several different things that can happen with the ordinance we need to at least reflect that decision in the ordinance, because there was actual kind of discrete fixed dollar and wording in there that applies there. And we would just need to do that before the end of June. But the reason we bumped it was to also provide council with clarity on the question of whether or not the food and beverage tax will, using the food and beverage tax to make the wastewater plant treatment or wastewater fund whole for that early payment, or letting the wastewater fund, any fund balance and manipulations there of how we address our capital planning to take care of that debt payment. And really the question was that council posed was what are the impact to rates based on that. And so we currently have a water and wastewater rate study underway. And so our objective with this is to match up the timing. So when we bring this food and beverage tax ordinance to council, we have information for you about what, if any, the rate impacts would be for not utilizing the food and beverage tax to make the wastewater fund whole. So that's the timing reason that it's out there. There's some other opportunities the council has within that discussion for other alterations to that, and those conversations could happen then when we bring it forward. Municipal Audit Commission is ordinance, I believe, was at least previewed. Melanie discussed that a little bit in a prior meeting about making some changes to kind of the structure and makeup of that. It's actually, I think it's a committee, Municipal Audit Committee. I have commission down, but it's a committee. It isn't probably as significant of an ordinance. It's more nuanced in terms of the budget committee, the relationship between the budget committee and the audit committee. So that ordinance will be in front of you there to discuss and provide direction. Water and storm drain SDC updates is the first item there in May. That is, I think Scott has provided some preview in our storm drain master plan discussions this week. But this will incorporate SDC's, alterations, methodology alterations, potentially, as well as actual rate changes or fee changes. And again, we've talked about the storm drain aspect of that already just this week. But both of those will come. And I think Scott had mentioned in the meeting this week that we will be bringing kind of re-energizing the SDC committee that helps put us through the paces on the proposed SDC methodology and rates. And so that'll be coming very soon for that committee formation. And as Scott mentioned this week, that does include the development community in that committee to provide their input as well. Yeah, we'll see the city manager. There's several different spots, as this highlights, in the next 3 or 4 months where council will be involved in the city manager recruitment process. There's several different components. This one is listing the criteria for the selection process. There is a need from an HR perspective to clarify and have council nail down, what criteria the council would like to use as you move from reviewing applicants to the selection panels and all of that. So that's one of the key steps in that process. The next one is the adoption of the Storm Drain Master Plan. That's we had a study session on that Monday and got into, Scott went through that for us all. So that master plan, as Scott said, all of our, I think in one of the slides he listed, or maybe it's in the CIP slides, listing all of our various master plans. We have 10 or 12 master plans in total for various things. And this key one will be coming to you in May. And another one that was a little highlighted just this week is the Recology rate increase review. We kind of snuck an update in from Gary Blake from Recology at the end of that meeting, deferring the standard timeline that's actually called out in the franchise and in resolution for the April 1 standard rate review and increase. As I mentioned, that one is based on an operating margin. Our franchise dictates rates to maintain Recology with an operating margin of between 8 and 12%. And that is the information that comes to council and with the corresponding CPI, and the deferral this time was because of rate issues with Dry Creek landfill that could be significantly impacting the ability of a CPI adjustment to be adequate to maintain our contractual obligation for Recology. So mixed in here, I didn't highlight them, but mixed in here, we clearly, we have our quarterly financial updates, that are a significant discussion point always, quarterly that Melanie provides. So the wildfire mitigation construction standards codes, maybe partly just to not have me droll on, Ralph and Bill, this is a kind of a combination project that either one or both of you can maybe describe the process that we put together. This is a follow-up to some of the vegetation, wildfire vegetation and defensible space stuff that came last year. And this deals with actual construction materials for new construction, new development. It's actually it's in chapter 15 of our code, which is the building code rather than the land use code. And so Ralph, as our fire marshal, has a role in there, but it's most of the authority in the building code is our building official, Steve Macchiato, who works in community development for Bill. So either one of you could quickly kind of go through the stakeholder process and kind of where we see this landing? Not necessarily the timing, but overall, but just how we're stepping through it.
Yeah, I can hit on a few points and then probably turn it over to Ralph because he's been very pivotal at the state level in terms of this. But like Adam said, the city did an extensive update of development standards in our land use code for vegetation management, and that was done in 2018. And as part of that, there was a large study coordinated, I believe, with the Oregon Department of Forestry and AFR that ultimately came to the conclusion that the entire city warranted being in a wildfire overlay. So that was a big part of it. We adopted a wildfire overlay that used to be just the southerly portion of town, and now the entire city is within it. And so vegetation management for new residential construction applies citywide, as well as the council adopted a prohibited list of flammable plants that we can add to, and it's adopted by resolution. But as part of that comprehensive approach to, I guess, community wildfire readiness, one of the remaining elements was dealing with the built environment, the construction of homes, and trying to make them more fire resistant. And we apply a statewide building codes, so we don't have local building codes, but the state did amend, I believe in 2019, the residential building code to include fire resistant methods for residential construction, but left it to local communities to decide if it would be appropriate for themselves to adopt it. And I believe the city of Medford is the first, and I believe only at this point, community to have adopted that chapter as part of their local building process. So we held a stakeholder meeting, I want to say 2 weeks ago. We sent out notices to builders and designers just to let them know we were looking at pursuing this, bringing this forth to the council. And while we didn't have a whole lot of turnout, I think it's because a lot of them in the Rogue Valley are already familiar with the code. And quite honestly, a lot of the homes that are being built in Ashland already incorporate a lot of the methods, such as rated roofing and cement fiber siding. And but overall, it was well received. And so I believe on March 15th, yes, I mean, we'll have a study session to go over the code. Ralph was, as I said, very involved at the state level, so I've let him provide some background on that.
Sure. Thanks, Bill. So basically, this is just the culmination of a lot of years of work. Ashland community has done a phenomenal job through Ashland Fire and Rescue, the Wildfire Commission, and all the work that Chris Chambers, Katie, Brian have all done to keep Ashland safe. And this is just the final piece of that puzzle. We worked at the state level with the Home Builders Association, the Oregon Fire Chiefs Association, Oregon Fire Marshals Association, League of Cities, as well as the oh geez, Peter, I forgot that last group. But anyways, we worked to get this passed at the state level to bring it to local adoption. We got it passed in Medford, which is part of the reason, like Bill said, we didn't get a whole lot of turnout. And then when I was building the work at the state level, I used a lot of our Ashland builders. So our Ashland builders were part of our numbers and the dollar amounts for the construction cost of getting this passed at the state level. So it's just one more tiny piece to just keep our community safe.
Great, thank you guys.
Adam, as we go forward, I'm just wondering, in the interest of time, if maybe we want to keep the commentary about each individual line item shorter, just so that the council can get the 30,000 foot feel for what is on the to be scheduled items list. I have no idea how long that is, but just wondering about that balance.
Sure. You bet. So I think we're fine. We're probably going to start getting to things that we haven't, that aren't as familiar and in process. So, yeah, I can start whipping through them. So the next one is reviewing the housing capacity analysis. That's another item that I think we've talked about briefly from Bill's team, and that is a requirement from last state legislative session. That will provide us with a whole lot of information that will lead to future decision-making from council, future strategies and options to consider in housing locally. And then
Adam,
related to that, similar legislation from the state is the land use code amendments for duplexes on single-family lots. I mentioned that one Tuesday night in the city manager update that we will have. You'll see that in several spots down here. It's an ordinance to make those permitted uses in the single family zones.
Adam, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think Steph is trying to get in, and I'm not sure you can see that on your screen.
No, let me, I can't, so let me get it bigger. Oops. Okay, got it. Thank you. All right, I'll jump back in. So the next piece is, we briefly mentioned this for utility rate reviews. So we have historically the last 6 or 8 years put kind of, rather than having each individual utility do rates at a different time of the year, we've had a recent history of putting them all together and doing our various utility rate reviews for water, wastewater, electric, storm drain, transportation, all of our utility rates. So we're going to have, it shows up a couple times here, have a review discussion, and then you'll have proposed rate adjustment resolutions for those utilities. And you'll see, I highlighted twice, duplexes and single family lots, showing that that's the actual codes ordinance showing up in front of you. Here's where the budget turns back into council. So then it comes back in June where council reviews the budget and actually adopts the budget and the tax rate. And then there's some other things that have to happen as kind of housekeeping, usually on the second meeting in June. This one is one that, the June, we hope, Ralph and I are working closely with the consultants on the ambulance service financial audit review. And we hope to have that. I just kind of put a tentative plug into this study session without having yet knowing if we can make that or if the consultants are able to make that happen. But that's going to be a key document that will lead to some decision-making as we decide how best to leverage and utilize the ambulance service that we currently operate for our region, ASA 3. Next one that highlighted is, this is one of the steps, we'll be talking about this next meeting in the CIP, but it's just one of the larger CIPs. It's kind of a critical one. It's Ashland Street. Been, very much public interest in that project. It's needs it badly. So that's just showing that is going to be in front of council to kick that project off. And then here's the police association. If everything goes fairly well, we would have that actual union contract agreement in front of council there. And then water and storm drain SDCs, the adoption after we discuss. And then the TAP master plan, Scott presented that to council a month or two ago, several meetings ago. Actually finishing that and having council adopt that master plan, kind of a subset master plan of our water master plan. So I'll just scroll and just show you that we have some regular stuff that we can schedule way far in advance. So those show up here, and then I'll flip over to what we have that are not popped into place yet. And in this one, I think we're pretty well served. Hopefully we don't do too much jumping around, but I'll let each department head kind of step through them. And as you see, a lot of them responsible department, almost everything I would say that we do has multiple departments, and they're all team efforts. So it's hard to kind of fully encapsulate who all is involved, but this is kind of the usual listing off the lead department for these. And again, not a fully inclusive list of everything. We have more we could probably, that we need to add to this. And this is the spot where we need to merge this with what council's goals and objectives are. And I guess the reason for the two different pages are there's not a whole lot of room to displaying that on the look ahead sheet that I just showed. There's not a whole lot of room to fit brand new stuff into that other than the smaller routine business. So this page is really the thing about what do we want to do and how do we set the priorities and schedule for at least the next fiscal year, and some of these extend past that fiscal year as well. So Dave, do you want to take the first shot at this?
Before you go away, Adam, I had a quick question.
Okay.
Preliminary look ahead that we're looking at. Do we get a chance to, can you email this to us just so that we can see what's coming as we move forward? I know that the look ahead's ever changing, but I would appreciate being able to look at this preliminary look ahead.
This particular document, sure, the goal would be to, to have, to kind of clean this up and do it after we're done with Thursday, Friday. Now, the regular look ahead that Elizabeth sends out, hopefully everybody gets. That's usually every Wednesday afternoon. After our department head meetings, we try and get adjustments to that. This one for sure. This one I will send out as well. It's a little more expanded. I'd like to send it out after we've had a chance to do the cleanup and hear the discussion for tomorrow. But I could send it out tonight if that's useful.
I'd appreciate it after it's cleaned up and after our meeting tomorrow. That'd be perfect. Thank you, Adam.
Great. Okay, Dave, do you want to kind of briefly go over some of those, and then feel free to, if there's others that we didn't get squeezed into this list for the good of the record.
Okay, well, I'm not going to try to go down the list because I didn't get everything included in there. I'm just going to mention a few things that I think are sort of major items coming up. For the most part, legal is reactive. We're reacting to requests for ordinances, to requests for records, and those kind of ongoing, kind of intermittent kind of duties fall into municipal court prosecutions, which take a considerable amount of time. Sometimes we have employee disciplinary actions where I have to work a lot with HR. Of course, as mentioned, we have the union contract negotiations and sometimes grievance negotiations. We have public records requests, drafting and review of bid solicitations and public contracts and intergovernmental agreements. Again, those are things that just come up. We don't, in legal, we don't control the schedule for those. Those are based on things happening in the departments. And then just preparing and editing ordinances and resolutions and other documents. And you've mentioned some of those already. For instance, the residential uses in commercial building space. That's going to be one that I'll have to spend some time working on the ordinance along with ComDev. The kind of big upcoming projects that I know of are, of course, 5G, which will require some changes in our land use plans and some special applications for uses of and regulations for uses of public right-of-way. That's going to be very complicated and will take probably a fair amount of council time to wrestle through those, particularly because it's of great interest to a number of members of the public. We're going to have franchise reviews. That's primarily telecommunication reviews that need to be done. Legal has been working towards revamping our procurement and public contracting rules, hopefully to streamline them some, and bringing that to council in the next few months, but I don't have a schedule to suggest yet. Also, we want to codify our administrative rules so they're easier to access for everybody, including the public. And finally, on just kind of other kind of big projects that I'm aware of, the Briscoe transaction, whatever that turns out to be, will take a fair amount of legal time. We're working on revamping the Memorandum of Understanding with Parks. Sometime in the next 6 months, we'll be looking at changes to the Union Pacific Rail Yard cleanup permit that DEQ and Union Pacific will be bringing to us, and that will involve community involvement and also council involvement. And then we need to spend some time working on the AFN franchise because there are some, I think, productive changes that can be made there. And that's my quick overview.
Pro Tem Hacks, Mr. Lohman. What is this, or where can I find out more of this memorandum of updating a memorandum of understanding with Parks?
Well,
What's that about?
Well, we we have an existing memorandum of understanding with Parks.
Yep.
It is, I can't remember. I think it may be from 2014. So it's a little out of date, and the Parks Commission has been asking for a review of that. We just need to spend some time on it and ultimately confer, obviously, with Parks Commission and the council to make sure both sides are comfortable with where we end up.
Will that be coming up before or after the budget?
After.
After.
Yeah, I think just in terms of time, it's going to be after, and it'll be impacted by the budget, I think. So it probably makes sense to come up after the budget.
Just to add on to that, that memorandum has a lot of real, operational stuff. It's not large policy stuff. It's about, agreements about who does what, and with our unique charter relationship, it's a really important and necessary operating document. It has a lot to do with our purchasing rules, HR, accounting. We have some more on the external side. Parks is basically our subcontractor. We pay Parks to do landscape maintenance for all of our city facilities and the medians. And so there's content in there about that arrangement to know what we're doing there. So it covers a pretty wide scope of mostly administrative and operational things, but there are some elements that I don't know, Dave, if those are, I don't think those are administratively signed and executed, or the council.
The current MOU is council approval.
Okay.
And I would assume that would be the case again.
Okay, just want to be sure what role everybody has.
Thank you.
In terms of the memorandum of understanding and the budget and the seniors services, at one time senior services were under the city, but they were given to Parks. And I know there's concern about funding at this point for senior services, as it's been given to Parks and they feel without necessarily the funding to support it.
Yeah, and the MOU structure is how we kind of memorialize those, whatever those decisions end up being between, like I said, sometimes it's at the very much in the weeds level, and then some are between Parks Commission and City Council, and so we capture those. I think we actually have 2 different MOUs that are still active MOUs, but yeah, that's the place for that kind of content.
The other area that I've been aware of recently is trails, and who really is in charge of trails and trail building, and who would then receive the funding to do that.
Right. Yep. I think that is Dave's nodding his head too. I think that is one that's on our list that we have Michael and city staff have talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just say there are a number of interesting decisions that have to be sort of allocating dollars and allocating responsibilities that have to be worked out between the 2 elected bodies.
I'm actually really interested in that and want to be in the loop with that.
So can I just jump in here really quick, Adam?
Yep, you bet.
So I just want to make it clear that the MOU that Dave Lohman was talking about initially doesn't deal anything with the services that we provide or any of the finances right now, anyways, for Ashland Parks and Recreation. It just has to do with how we manage and how we use city central services to manage, and it also touches a lot on risk management for the city as far as policies and things like that go. The other MOU is more of the contract for services or fees for services that we perform for the city of Ashland. And right now it just has to do with the work that we do for grounds maintenance. There's nothing in there about the senior services program. That was given over to Ashland Parks and Recreation by resolution. And what was the other one? Oh, trails is something I would, like Adam had mentioned, we definitely want to look at adding that to that second MOU that discusses fees for services and things like that.
So Adam,
Yes.
on that note, there's a little bit of a chicken egg dilemma here as far as budget is concerned, that if we have this MOU and these conversations about money after the budget with parks, that's going to be locking the barn door a little bit after the horse is stolen to a degree. So I just want to point that out. The other important thing about parks to keep in mind is their COVID, they were an essential player in our emergency COVID response. And we would be well served not to forget that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd add to the emergency response, as I hope you saw in our Alameda fire response. Parks plays a heavy role in every emergency operations effort that we have. Michael's role in the care and shelter part of our EOC is pretty critical. So, yep. Yeah, and I think that chicken and egg thing is always tough. I think the MOU can memorialize decisions that are made. So I don't think that it's that one has to come before the other. They kind of just end up cleaning each other up, and we know then that we need to amend the MOU as decisions are made between the two entities. Bill, do you want to briefly go over the few that we had here that we haven't already talked about that were?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief. The seismic code ordinance, that's been on the list for a while, and it was put on the list by probably a couple building officials back, primarily due to the fact that a lot of research has been done in the Northwest about the possibility of a fairly significant seismic event. And should the city consider a local building code amendment that would require, building renovations, new construction to be built to a higher standard. The key issue why Ashland had an interest in it is that often such codes, you look at them for areas that communities that have a central business district that's historic and that is comprised with mainly unreinforced masonry historic buildings, which fits Ashland to a T. It's probably our most valuable location real estate wise. The problem when we initially started looking at it, as you'd expect, is the potential cost to business and property owners, and were there ways, at least at the initial time we talked to council, to explore incentives in order to encourage it rather than mandate it. The housing production strategy it's another requirement coming out of the state that follows our housing needs analysis. The production strategy requires the city to take your findings from your needs analysis and look at what the priorities are, which generally in Ashland is going to be, we're projecting half of the number of housing units that we'll need over the next 20 years to be for a lower income type housing type. So it requires us to put together a strategy that identifies those priorities and identifies what actions we're going to take over the next several years to try to improve the situation. And that could be anywhere from changes to our zoning code to financial incentives to look at how to prepare, help finance infrastructure in some of these areas. But the focus clearly will be on multifamily and lower cost ownership housing. So it's going to be challenging. The Croman Mill rezone analysis for some of the newer council members, we received a significant master planning grant back in 2010 and developed a master plan for the Croman Mill area, which the planning area is probably around 85 acres. The mill site itself that was abandoned in 1996 is probably around 65, 70 acres. And so there was a master plan developed there's extensive waste that needs to be removed because of 6 decades worth of mill operations. And quite honestly, probably it's not something that the property owners anticipated, but what this project would look like when it's appropriate would be to see if possibly some rezoning specifically to accommodate additional residential housing units in the Croman area might be something that could jumpstart development in the Croman property. And specifically, the difficulty is public infrastructure, streets, the extension of utilities. But since we have such a strong residential market and employment uses tend to be cyclical, maybe rezoning it for more housing would provide that financial jumpstart to build some infrastructure. And then lastly, we know there's the Climate, Energy, and Action Plan does have items identified that would likely involve changes to our land use ordinance, maybe ways to encourage, for example, encourage new residential homes to reserve a specific percentage of the roof area to locate solar collection systems. And so we're anticipating at some point being able to work with the climate policy group and depending on what their objective is, maybe have a package of land use ordinances that will forward specific areas identified in the Climate, Energy, and Action Plan.
Thank you. Scott, we just have a couple here, and these are kind of tag team, at least that first one's tag team, the two of us. I'll quickly hit it. This is kind of it's turned into a bit of an ongoing piece. We've got different surplus properties, and we provided probably 12 to 16 months ago, council update on kind of an exhaustive, here's our entire inventory of properties that we, and we try to label them. Here's what we use. Here are kind of slivers of rights of way that are, would be great to just get off the books, but they're just very weird little right-of-way remnants. And then we have a selection of properties that council identified at the time that kind of were kind of tier 1 properties or primary properties to look to surplus. And actually council did formally surplus several of the properties. So we're in the process of taking some of the more straightforward properties and had appraisals complete. Appraisals are nearly done with all but one of the initial 5 that we did. So we'll be coming back to council in short order for that first set. And then, Scott, maybe, and then we've got two kind of larger ones that require multiple check-ins with council, B Street Yard, and ultimately the Imperatrice. I know Scott, you want to hit on those real quick?
Yeah, so like Adam said, we have a couple what I think are readily available properties to move forward with divesting the city's interest in them. There are a couple properties that require a little bit more of strategic planning moving forward, and we have some things in the works already. The B Street Yard location is one of those, and the intent is to divest of that location once the Hardesty property site development work gets finished up. And we're looking at doing that in the next biennium. We need to build a storage building down there to house some of the critical equipment that can't be housed outside from the operational standpoint. And so once we kind of transition our equipment out and have it have the ability to have it stored inside moving into potentially next winter, then we can look at divesting of the B Street property. We'll have a functional appraisal completed for that property within the next few weeks. And then the other one that's been talked about over the years is the Imperatrice property. And we've spoken previously with Parks and the Land Conservation Center. And so there's some strategic planning and discussions that should continue about that. The functional need for a wastewater standpoint for the Imperatrice property is truly, really, in my viewpoint, no longer warranted. And so there could be some movement to move that property to a better use between Parks Department and the Nature Land Conservancy. So we would like to continue those discussions moving forward. So those, I guess, I have a couple that we'll bring forward in that April meeting that are really the short term, the green light ones that we're looking for direction on council to move forward with, and then the yellow ones that still need some work to be done. But we're proposing a general direction that we're heading on those. And then there's going to be a significant discussion on the rest of the parcels that we have in the complete list that Adam mentioned. A lot of these little right-of-way slivers that don't really provide a benefit, won't be used for right-of-way essential purposes that could be vacated, and the adjoining property owners would receive that vacated property as part of a formal process. So that's kind of the third tier that we would look at in that surplus property setup for council. So I expect there'd be numerous discussions moving forward on the city assets and surplus properties.
All right, thank you for that. Oh,
Adam?
yes.
Adam? I don't want to derail us on that piece, but I'm curious because the timing is in parallel with the budget. Will aspects of that decision also inform our budget, or are they being handled separately? Meaning whatever council decides, if council were to decide to sell a piece of property, is that sale reflected in our budget numbers, or would it be a supplemental budget at a later date?
B Street and Imperatrice would definitely, if they happen, they should, at least B Street would happen within the biennium, and that would be a supplemental. And Imperatrice, if it did, would be a supplemental as well. That one might take a little bit longer because of the interesting uses and players involved. Really cool opportunity, I think. That's a really neat project in collaboration. We've talked with Michael extensively about it, and over the years about what it could turn into in Southern Oregon Land Conservancy as well. So yeah, short answer, supplementals. The green light properties that Scott just talked about, those we will, they're smaller in dollar, but still very good projects that council could still go a couple ways on. So they probably will be able to be incorporated into budget.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
I don't want to derail either, but you just said there's something really exciting down the road with the Conservancy and the Imperatrice property. Can you just give us in a nutshell what you guys are looking at there?
Sure, it's partly stuff that has been kind of discussed at various council levels and community levels, and there's been a long-term interest. As Scott said, it's been kind of on hold. The whole property and doing anything with it has been on hold because of the question mark from the DEQ of will we need it for wastewater, regulatory purposes. And as Scott said, I don't know, are we 99%? I mean, we're closing in on 100% sure that isn't going to be the case anymore. So then it opens the door to what do we do? Because it was originally purchased with wastewater funds. So how do we repay the wastewater fund for that asset? And then I guess to me, the cool and interesting part is the upper above the ditch part, especially. We did, Tom McBartlett and I, Tom primarily, we did some survey work for flora and fauna to know what is up there from environmental assets. And it's a really interesting undisturbed piece that the Southern Oregon Land Conservancy has, I think, talked with council, talked with staff, talked with Parks Commission about acquiring that some way and preserving that with the potential for inclusion of trails. The lower half, that's kind of the more disturbed part, we still have a little bit of nook and cranny of operations, but some cool ideas and discussions that have come up involve mountain bike opportunities and other things. So there's to me, it's because we've cleared the decks of the DEQ need for that property. It's more into the, it's a community asset that there's a lot of different things that can be done with it now.
Thank you. Sorry, I turn it over to Council Moran. Sorry, Sean, go ahead.
Thank you, guys.
I was here before Councilman Moran, but
Councilor Steffinger, please.
there are two things that I wanted to have addressed. With Imperatrice property and also probably immigrant area, we're running out of trails for mountain bikes in the watershed. And the council needs to know that. You can't build too many more trails there. And yet there's a lot of push to make this city a diverse city for young people because of mountain biking. So I think it's a really important thing to factor into our economic future, to look at that.
Yeah, and I'll adjust what I said. I think the upper reach probably has potential for, you know, some mountain biking as well. Just the lower part is to me more likely. But yes, and I know Michael and Parks Commission have been. I've just heard around the edges some stuff about, you know, trail access and Emigrant Creek area or Emigrant Lake area, but clearly more to come on that topic. I agree.
And also, when we consider low-income housing and trailer parks or mobile home parks, are we looking at earthquake danger and ways to remediate that? Because that, generally speaking, those are homes that are most affected by earthquakes.
I'm not sure if the seismic code, well, I'll note that down and maybe take it as a follow-up note. But to see if it was included in the seismic stuff. And again, I don't know if that relates to Imperatrice, you know, from a zoning perspective, that is unlikely to have housing. But if you're talking about our mobile home parks that are existing, we have very few inside the city limits. But I'll take that down.
Well, when you talk about also any type of housing that's temporary, there are some types, such as domes types, for even that are a lot safer for people, even in a temporary situation, than other types. So.
Okay. Okay, Pro Tem Hanks. Firstly, I'd just like to comment on what Councilor Stefan just said. I would wholeheartedly agree that I think there is a wide swath of people within our community that has a broad interest in trying to work with the City and Parks Department to expand, bike tourism in various shapes and forms. And I know our business community would celebrate it. Our bed and breakfast and hotel community would celebrate it. So I think we need to be thinking about how to achieve that. And I welcome Councilor Steffange's positive comments in that area. One thing I wanted to just throw out there, in an effort to kill more than one bird with one stone, is there a way? I know last night you had mentioned the residential use and commercial code change update, which is coming. But also the Chrome and Mills, as Mr. Molnar had mentioned. But vertical housing, I mean, just a way to kind of, not to silo each one and focus on one over specifically more than another one. But, when we talk about eliminating barriers to housing development and availability, this to me seems like a perfect idea to kind of figure out a way to morph some of these ideas together to have an open discussion for council, so we can evaluate and look at what's more efficient or effective than the other, or how they can complement each other in various developments or ideas. So I would just throw that out there as something that if we could incorporate several of these, these concepts in one meeting, I think it would be more productive. But I'll leave it with that.
Okay, there you go. For follow-up, that may relate to the housing production strategy item that Bill had mentioned, because that's really looking at, you're right, the kind of that holistic look of all the different things that we may need to approach in terms of the housing side. So thank you.
No, thank you.
Tom, do you want to hit real quick on a couple of these electric items, and we can tag team this one too?
Yeah, the first one there, the Mountain Avenue substation, is something that was identified before my time here as being an asset to the city, a good thing for the utility to own, and then kind of left for dead as an untenable. But in the last couple of years, my developing a relationship with BPA and stuff, I kind of rekindled that and saw some real opportunity for not only cost savings, but resiliency and efficiency within the utility and preparing for growth. So we've rekindled those conversations. I think it's working a lot more positively now. And BPA's recent rate proposal kind of lit a little more fire in it there. The money we could save, the one area that we get charged for them owning that as compared to us, they're proposing a 29% increase in starting October of October of this year. So we're working on that. It'll be a significant amount of money. We're not really sure where it's going to land yet, but it is something that'll probably be in front of you more than once.
It just to add on to that, I think as Tom hit on, it's got a really good ROI. I mean, it's one that we do. We have cost avoidance in future bills because if it becomes our asset rather than theirs, and then the resiliency options and opportunities there, resiliency and growth, both are strong. And I've been involved in this on and off. As Tom said, we've been on and off negotiations with this since I think 2012, maybe even earlier. And so it's kind of come on and off our radar, and Tom's really got it in a strong position again. So we don't know exactly when that'll come. That's why it's on this list. We don't know exactly how far we get with BPA when we get it down to a negotiated amount where we feel it's worthy of bringing to council to get into the very nitty-gritty details. But it's making good progress.
Adam, it's Paula again. With regard to BPA, I know we are about 5 years out from the next round of contract negotiation, but I can't help but think now's the time to start thinking that way. Clearly, it doesn't have to happen in the next few months, but I would love to learn what we can do ahead of time to position ourselves best for that. Maybe in terms of, again, towards the latter part of this 2-year planning period, a study session of some sort to understand that contract. It's overlaps with the fact that it is clean energy, even if it isn't sustainable energy. And likewise, that we've had, I think, 30 years with them and certain things may be changing. But again, there's a lot of detail in that. I would love to just better understand what we're buying, when we're buying, why we're buying, and a comprehensive look at it.
I would second Councilor Hyatt's motion.
Yeah, no, we definitely, that's been what Tom and I have been talking about that already. Tom has been kind of gathering, Tom's very involved in it already. I mean, it's not new, Tom. Yeah, Tom's on it weekly. The Public Power Council, the Northwest Requirements Utilities groups that we are members of are doing a lot of work in that, and Tom is keeping tabs. And we were just talking about it recently with some of the members of the Climate Policy Commission, who are likewise very interested. I think will be an asset to council as we go through. You can utilize that advisory body to help. But Tom has already put together some materials. I think we're assembling kind of a plan to make sure that we're all up to speed early enough that it makes sense, because there's a lot to it. There's a lot of options. There probably will be a lot of options, and yeah, so we're close to that spot, and we will get that. It's a good ad to formally get on the list.
I appreciate that, and Tom, thank you for your work and the work of your team.
The other big one on there that is kind of exciting for a lot of people is the 1 megawatt solar project. We've hinted about it before. It's actually, with Scott's help and the Airport Commission and that kind of stuff, it's looking like something that we could move forward on sooner rather than later, finally. And that's another one that the CPC is involved in, and Adam and Stu also, and of course, the council will be when it comes time to spend any money.
And both of those projects kind of roll into the other one that's sandwiched in there is the electric department, electric utilities version of a master plan. And that's the 10-year infrastructure, see if I spelled it right, plan update. I think we're in year 6 or 7 of the last plan. And both that 1 megawatt and the purchase of the BPA substation are both key components that would integrate into that 10-year infrastructure plan. And that's another item that the climate action plan calls out to add to that, which we have 2 of the 3 legs of a master plan for electric, and the leg that we don't really have embedded into a master plan is kind of the policy side. What do we want? What is the power mix we want? I think it dovetails, all that policy work dovetails really nicely with what Councilor Hyatt just said about getting us in line and ready to know what we want out of a BPA contract, or what else might be out there that we're comparing against a BPA contract. So the 10-year infrastructure plan, the cost of service and rate study, those are two of the three legs. The third leg that we're going to add to it in this biennium is really that policy part. What is our renewable portfolio? How much do we want to invest in EV electrification? Kind of rolling in some of the work that we've historically done. We just really haven't put it all together into one complete master plan that is more typical in the public works side than in the electric side. So all of these kind of all fit together, and the Climate Policy Commission is playing kind of growing into playing a really productive role in being able to be on the ground with us on that.
Well, one other thing I could add in there, Adam, to Councilor Hyatt's question. I've been doing a lot of work with NRU as far as that options thing. What are the options and what do they look like? And what do they look like specifically for Ashland? So, and when that gets a little more mature, it'll definitely be something that is shared.
Thank you for that, Tom.
Ralph, do you want to quickly hit the couple there that I'm sure there's more going on, obviously, in fire that we didn't get to this list, but hit on those two items real quick?
Sure, absolutely. The first one, which has got a lot of attention, is our wildfire study and our evacuation plan. We're hoping, we just sent another round of questions back from the consultants that came out to us. So we just sent those back about 3 weeks ago. So we're hoping that'll get wound up. With Alameda Fire, I walked into a meeting today with Aaron Ott, who is the emergency manager with the city of Medford. And they're also starting a kind of a zoning type evacuation plan that's launching from the city of Medford outward. Initially, the city of Ashland wasn't really brought into this, and Adam, I believe that it's basically because of the evacuation plan for Medford. But this is going to correlate with them to have a bunch of zones starting in Medford working out that we can put our evacuation plan with them, where we were looking at numbers, they're looking at letters. So I'm not really too worried about that in the grand scheme of things. So I'm really looking forward to that and getting that before you guys, so that your constituents and our citizens can answer a lot of questions about wildfire and bringing this forward. It's not going to be anything that's going to get clicked on overnight. It's going to take a lot of public education, a lot of work from our CERT volunteers, a lot of work and notifications and emails, flyers, our Nixle, and everything else like that. So I'm really looking forward to getting that one before you once we get the information. And then the other one, I'm really not sure how you want me to address this one, Adam, with the EOC, is that right now the city of Ashland does not have a functioning EOC. Originally, when I first got here, it was at the city council, the council chambers, but unfortunately the council chambers is not a structurally sound facility, and we can't use it as a priority building. The EOC has to be a priority building, so we've been working towards moving that. The Grove was kind of selected as the location. It can work as a multi-use building. It can work as an emergency operations center well into the future. We don't really need to, yep. I'm sorry, I thought I heard background. And then we are going to work with trying to get the parks allowing us into the building to set up the EOC, run it. Our radios have been moved over. We got an emergency generator there. So I'm not really sure what else you wanted on that one, Adam.
No, that's good. It's just a recognition that we're still we're transitioning the EOC, and that obviously our emergency operations plan needs to reflect that. And we've been working with Michael on how best to do that, and it probably folds into an item that's, I think, at the bottom, which is really the city hall and site facility movement, office consolidation. How we plan and map out the assets, the facilities assets we have, and best utilize them. So this is a small piece of that, but it's an important piece of our facility master planning as we look to what do we want our facilities to look like and function like in the next 10 to hopefully 40, 50 years. So that's teaser for what was down at the bottom of the list, but that is due for discussion, obviously, since the bond measure did not happen. we need to look at, what are other strategies? And honestly, as I think I've said earlier, COVID, one of the few silver linings there is that we have looked at and have been able to function differently. I think that will do us well in a look at what our facility needs are into the future for our workforce. And I've got some other ideas that we're percolating internally, and that we'll get to a spot where we get that put into a council study session and really get that issue back on the table.
If we're going to use the Grove as an emergency center, it doesn't have a kitchen. Is there any concern about there not being any way to deal with food there? If there's staff there that might be isolated in that situation?
Yeah, there's a variety of things that we would need, to check off the list for an EOC, to fully, spool up an EOC. So, none of our sites are perfect. The council chambers didn't have that either. But yeah, all of those are on the list of how do we accommodate a very well-functioning EOC for the community.
Adam, if I may, I just have a time check. I don't know how many more elements are on this list. We can't see all the way down, but I think it's important that we talk about what is on the list as opposed to those actual items. I don't think now is the time for us to go into detail. So I just want to put that out to the group. I think it's particularly important that we get all the way through this list so we can see what those topics are. So I don't know if that's helpful, but I do recognize that we only have about a half an hour left.
Certainly, we're pretty much this screenshot is what's probably left. Tina, do you want to hop on yours real quick?
I think Adam pretty much covered mine, so I can keep mine brief. We have the 2 high-profile recruitments, and then the rest of the bulk of our negotiations, 4 of the 5 contracts. So that'll keep us hopping. And then we're going to try and do a lot more focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion training to follow up on the April training that we have. We'll just continue to work on that internally. So that's going to be a big focus. Of course, COVID has continued to throw challenges at HR for staffing and just, policy turnaround changes. And so hopefully that will ease off so we can focus on some other more meaningful work. So
I would just add real quick that the unsung heroes of our COVID, operationally of COVID, is HR. We have leaned on them heavily, every department, to stay in legal compliance, to stay in practical, operational, functional compliance. And it's a tremendous, from supervisors on up to department heads and myself. We lean on HR nearly every day for the COVID. I never would have figured how this would have gone. Obviously, nobody would have, but it is a major HR lift all the time for our COVID work. So, and maybe that's tapering, who knows? So, yep, thanks for that. Melanie, do you want to go through these? There's some that could probably be clumped, and some are more internal that are just kind of highlight. But want to rip through those?
Okay, I just want to make sure you can hear me. My headphones died off. So we have most of what finance does is helping other departments. So a lot of what is listed here really is following other departments' projects or helping them through those projects or those plans or evaluations or things like that. So the other thing that we're doing is obviously a lot of compliance. We take those laws very seriously. There's a lot of things that we must do that do touch council all the time, as well as touch all the departments. We try to blend both of those activities into kind of an ongoing strategic evaluation. So kind of leaning on that internal audit mindset to kind of just lend support, be consultative with other departments and with council. A couple of things I do just want to highlight is the Munis Upgrades. That is the city's enterprise resource planning program. That's our software. It has been, when they update it, you can limp along without doing that update for so long. And then after a while, it starts to become a problem. So that's something that we are very much focused on and is definitely a resource consumption right now. The insurance fund we've talked about with council, that is on our project list to do a full evaluation of its structure, as well as kind of looking at the self-funding versus extra funding, you know, the different methodologies that you can use. Grants are already becoming a very significant part of the whole city's operations. To date, mostly the departments have handled a lot of the grants management. With the changes in federal law, and particularly with the change in the federal administration, we're seeing a huge workload coming down the pipe. We're already feeling it, frankly, with FEMA. But knowing that the availability of funds is fantastic, unfortunately, there are a lot of rules. And so that is definitely something that finance is heavily focused on. Most of what we've identified here with trying to support the departments is also leaning toward developing a fiscal strategies plan. And that is, you know, kind of very much dependent on the direction of council going forward with your long-term vision and your strategic planning. But then making the steps to ensure that all the other components from a fiscal perspective are actually able to support those strategic plans.
No questions, I'll jump in. And one that I want to highlight that's on the finance list that's kind of a follow-up from some initial kind of COVID financial updates that we gave earlier in 2020 is the cemetery trust fund evaluation. It's kind of a complicated thing. It's one that we need to make sure we understand it and do it right and legal. But that's one that we talked about as a potential kind of better maximizing that. And I think that's a great one that I like to see on that list, because it's one that's been come up many times in the past from Budget Committee about why it's there, what it does, how it works, and then what are our possibilities with it, and what are our limitations. So that one I think it's not giant dollars, but I think it's an important one that we've kind of wanted to attack for a long time and just haven't been able to do it. I was wrong. A few more. So these are back to admin right now, at least. I kind of function as in my role currently also managing IT and AFN directly. So we need an IT strategic plan. We're some of the budget decision making is going to drive or is going to accelerate that need, but we do not have a current strategic plan for how we utilize IT within our organization. So that's a key one. AFN infrastructure investment strategy. So we have talked about AFN business plans before. Those are usually have leaned on kind of acquiring customers, market share, advertising, that kind of thing. This item is really more focused on what do we do with an aging infrastructure. It's an aging cable plant, cable modem operation. It needs to transition to being a fiber to the premise operation. The questions that will come through to council are where does that investment funding come from? What is the timeline for that? Is that should that be done internal? What is AFN 2.0 need to look like? And I think there was always a hope or a plan that we would have that conversation once the AFN debt service has been paid off. We're saying internally that we don't think we should wait that long. There's four more years before that's paid off, and we cannot lose our investment by waiting that long to decide what we want to do with AFN. So AFN is, I think, in the somewhere in this biennium, we got to figure out how to attack that, and that's going to be a big one, because there's some policy decisions, there's some public-private decisions, there's some partner decisions. There's a lot in that one. Yes.
Excuse me. I appreciate that mention of a strategic vision, strategic plan, and I think that is essential, especially with the move going forward with how our city deals with COVID and coming out of COVID, et cetera. And I think that's relevant to how our department heads and our business tourist community will evolve together. So that said, I would particularly like and be interested in understanding as we go forward, the goals of the cost cut committee, which evaluated trying to find definitive ways to streamline operations, with the goal of creating meaningful cost benefits and creating efficiencies to reduce cost. I thought that was really, really important. You were there for those meetings, and considering outsourcing services with the goal of reducing costs. So an overview of how do we streamline? How do we find a way? We can't be everything to everyone. So how do we find a way to make this work? And when department heads go through and they work on evaluating and strategically planning 18 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, this has to be a key part of that process. So I would just urge that to be taken to heart, and as we move forward, to get some clarity for council so we understand what's being evaluated and decided.
Absolutely. Thank you. I absolutely agree with you. And we have been doing that. We as a management team, really, we're assembling kind of, a collection of things to bring back to council to say, here's what we think we've done already that we historically have done that falls under that here's what we've done since the council adopted those recommendations, and here's what we see as opportunities in the future. And we haven't hit this list, but we've talked in meetings about the regionalization opportunities in the fire service, in our fire department. Those are not necessarily mergers and consolidations, but there are efficiencies that can be done. And you're right, there are a lot, and our department heads are not planning to think about that, are thinking about that, and we have a number of them that you'll see in the budget process this time. But what we're due for at some point is kind of a summary report back, looking at it just through that lens. So I agree with you. Appreciate that.
I would appreciate that. I think it's a good opportunity for everyone to kind of think out of the box, maybe a little bit area of being uncomfortable, but that's fine. And to expand upon your spreadsheet, it would be great to see, that what exactly is happening in relation to those things you've outlined. If you also could add a column on funding, have we spent money on it? Have we not? If we spend money on it, how much money have we spent? So as a council, as a governing body, we understand how these taxpayer resources being spent and allocated.
Yep, got it.
Thank you.
I think to add on to that, since I was on that committee, it's also important to try to understand what the city's basic responsibilities are and what the things that are really added values of county responsibilities, state responsibilities, federal responsibilities, because we add things to our city because we value things, but they're not essential services of the city. And so in looking at what you're talking about, Sean, I think that's also an important thing to do.
Thank you, Council. I would agree with you completely.
Yep.
Adam, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sean. I didn't mean to cut you off. Okay. On the IT strategic plan, that one gets my radar up because you read all the articles about various cities being hacked or having issues with that type of external attack for whatever reason, and the havoc that it can create, especially when you run the utilities that we run. I'm curious if planning for such things is included in that strategic plan. Is that more of a liability insurance situation? Where does that plug in?
Both. Yeah, it hits it very strongly in both. I mentioned that AFN had that DDoS, the distributed attack not too long ago. That was a really good opportunity to, look at all of our operational plans and how we implement and our order, who we notify, how we respond to those things. So it's a growing part of our network administrator's job. It's probably a disproportionate amount of his job now. And we have, as you say, with utilities, IT strategic plan isn't just our IT department. It is the SCADA systems that run, the water and wastewater plants that run, that Tom relies on for reporting outages, automated, understanding what the system is doing. Those SCADA systems have a ton of cyber security liability potential. And they also, that is part of the IT department to some degree is to, there's a handoff there between the department and IT, but the short answer is yes, that's a huge part of that. We have good procedures and practices in place, but the strategic plan is, as with any master plan, it updates them, it brings them all into one place, and it makes sure that we are comprehensively able to address it and assign it and know who's responsible for what.
Thank you for that clarity. I appreciate it.
So we're right down to the bottom. And I think we actually already talked about that one. City Hall rehabilitation and a facilities consolidation plan. That's looking at next steps, kind of post-bond steps. And as I mentioned, I think we have some lessons learned about what we may need compared to the facilities space needs analysis that was done. That's probably dated. It's probably one that we could look at and significant alterations to what was expected and planned when that document was when that assessment was done in 2015, 16, I believe. So we have some significant changes to make to what do we need, and then we also have big conversations about how do we accomplish that. I'll just do one little plug is I think that's going to be important when we talk about City Hall to not just talk about the shell and the structure, the building and how much it costs, but we need to talk about what uses go in it. What do we want to have in this building, both for our own operations, but also for the community. And I think that might have been something that didn't get hit hard enough the last go around. Where should everybody be, and what is the most efficient operationally for everybody to be, and what's also the best utilization for the public and the customers that interact with us in the places where there are interactions. So I think that's an important one coming, and we again don't have that slotted. It's likely a post-budget discussion about where to slot that. I added three kind of software things that Melissa and I and Elizabeth work on. And one of those is the citywide website. We are in process. You may have seen the climate action website. That is kind of the sneak peek at the new platform. They just launched, they were the guinea pigs to go through our platform change, and other departments are in process. So we are kind of spooling ourselves up and switching our website over to a different platform that I think is going to be much more pliable and flexible for departments, and I think a better product for the public to access us. And then two smaller ones in there that are still software that really are heavy internal, but you'll see on the outside, at least the Granicus software, which that is the agendas package, the minutes software package that also rolls into the website. That makes all of that material that is hard to access after meetings on the website, unless you know what day it happened on, that all of that material that is a huge body of work for both staff and council, that we will be able to show. So the development of that, the workflows associated with that internally before it's produced, and then after it's produced and archived, all of that is contained in this new software that I think is going to be a significant operational improvement in efficiency, as well as a benefit to council and to the general public for archival purposes. And then one is really a complete COVID necessity that came across is DocuSign. We still have some policy work we still need to do to make sure that it's meeting all of our document retention and storage, but we're moving towards much more of our official work being able to be legally done through DocuSign instead of the old school way. So we made it through the list.
Adam, if I may, one of the things that is coming up, and we heard some of it tonight, just around mountain biking and what else we might do around economic development. I recognize that a city doesn't typically take the lead in economic development, but we also know that we're coming into a new world post-COVID on some level, and that our economic development strategy needs to be very robust in recognizing the reality of the world that we're coming into and in that diversification of our economy. And I understand there's some efforts underway with the chamber, but I'm just wondering, in terms of this work plan, what do you see happening over the course of this time frame, and where does that sit? So I know that you've been doing I think the bulk of that work on behalf of the city, but what can we expect to see coming on the economic development front?
Yeah,
If I may, can we lose the shared screen?
sure, you bet. There we go. Yes, that one needs to be on the list. I don't know, I will for sure add it to the to be the not scheduled part that we just went through. We do have a grant that is kind of a partial lead into an update to the overall economic development strategy. We have a $150,000 grant that between the city chamber and SOU that it's kind of a bridge thing. It hits on what kind of a tourist, kind of more of the tourist sector of the economy, but then provides us with, I think, a bridge to a full update of the economic development strategy. So I will get that on the list. I think I need to work with Sandra a little bit more to look at the details of kind of the output of timing output of that grant, because I think we'll build off of the results of that grant into the work that you're describing. Hi, yes.
Yeah, in regards to economic development, I mean, Councilor Graham brings it up. The city has spent over the last 10 years nearly $1.9 million through its economic development program. I think it's a wonderful conversation to have, but I think what we need to do really going forward is to have performance metrics around how we spend money and what we expect to get from that money. So I don't know if the chamber would be the best outlet to do that. They're involved in tourism and they're trying to figure out exactly what they're doing. And hopefully they'll be able to come back to us in April with a concrete plan, to increase our tourism. I think when we look at economic development, we have to be a little bit more creative in thinking, because we've tried this for the last 10 years and we really need to look at a viable plan to create living wage jobs for our community. We have to figure it out. So, I would just urge that we think a little bit more creative, a little bit more out of the box, and not just say, hey, let's rely on the process we used before to do it, because it was marginally successful at best. And I think, we really need, especially now, to figure out a way to create living wage jobs and make Ashland a place where people want to move to grow their families, invest, and create their, expand their vision for their businesses.
I agree. And the economic development strategy does exactly, it outlines that, and that's what council, will be able to shape and form as we move forward. It's coming up on 10 years old. I would say that we've accomplished a good deal within that strategy. And I guess I agree with Councilor Graham that there's a certain role that municipal government plays in economic development. And then there's roles outside of that. And we need to maximize what we do, and we need to explain what we do and communicate what we do a little better. I was just in a meeting today with Business Oregon and So Ready with a fairly large expansion of a business here locally that shuttered for a year and a half and now got major reinvestment, and we'll have some more information on that shortly. But we think we've got a really good opportunity through our relationship piece to leverage the Strategic Reserve Fund and do some things to assist exactly the kind of businesses that you're describing. So the traded sector side, as well as the tourism sector side.
Well, I look forward to that dialogue. Thank you.
Anything at the moment. The other question I have, Adam, is around our communications and public engagement, recognizing that we have a staffing capacity and budgetary capacity issue with that. Just wondering if there is any plans in the work plan to figure out how to leverage the new website and whatever tools we might have. I know people are I think quite a few folks are very interested in what the city does, but they're finding that it's somewhat difficult to keep track of the various there's a lot, of course, that the city does, and it's hard to keep track of all that. So is there a plan underway for in this time period to see what we can do with the limited resources we have?
Yes, the website is, and I think we've talked about that one a little bit. The website is kind of that foundational piece of what can it provide in a different way. And again, some of that is we do need to redefine, and we have a communications plan. We need to update that communications plan. So that's it's a key topic for the budget, is what kind of staffing resource does the council want to put towards that topic, because we have been we're down a number of people in administration. That's kind of where that has gone. The last person that had that as a major part of their job retired several years ago. So we've been decentralized even more than we had in the past. And I think that what you're describing shows some of there's upsides to decentralized, but there's some downsides to it as well. So yeah, fair point, and I'll make more of a focused item on that on this list.
Hey, Adam.
Yeah.
So I was listening to what you were saying about that and also about AFN, and I'm wondering, is there a plan afoot to sort of leverage the experts that we already have in our community on these areas? I was just speaking to someone today who literally does cybersecurity and email systems and web systems for MI5 in the UK and all over the globe. Like, this person's an internationally respected person in specific areas like AFN and servers and giant systems. And then, of course, when it comes to communications, we have people in this community who are experts times a million on these subjects. Is there some way that we can start engaging some of those folks to assist, or is that not something that we feel we can do?
Depends on how to engage them on, on what aspects to engage them on. I mean, doing our work, no, but helping develop plans or strategies, for the policy side or the direction, for sure. And we have done that in the past with, our communications plan did have an ad hoc committee with those kinds of people on them. AFN has had several different ad hoc committees over the years, 2 or 3, when tasked by council to look at kind of specific things. One of them was really a business model of, should it be a utility or should it be in the retail business? Those kind of questions. So yeah, the right format and structure, we do utilize those in every topic we can. I know Bill, from the Planning Commission, speaking of various, we have amazing expertise in all kinds of topics, and several people on the Planning Commission are just, land use experts, land use attorneys. So you're absolutely correct that we've got some amazing resources. It's just a matter of what to apply them to, and where the limits are of, doing work of the city versus doing policy and action planning for the city.
Yeah, and I was kind of thinking they could provide a objective third-party dialogue and presentation for council as they consider matters, so that we've got the city perspective in terms of staff, the policymakers in terms of council, and people who could offer sort of a bridge there to give us a further, not that staff isn't objective, but to give us a further layer. So that was the thinking on it. Go ahead, Councilor Moran.
Sorry to interrupt. I was just going to ask, is that an ad hoc committee? Is there a limited time kind of format you can set that up, or how does that work?
Well, we need to have some level of formality to that.
Right.
So we need to know what an ad hoc committee has, a charge and a scope and a time frame.
Okay, I'm just asking if that's the format. Okay.
That's the typical model. There's some that are super ad hoc where it's just we can put out a poll, or there's different layers. But in terms of, I think what Mayor Akins was saying, I would consider those kind of things, an ad hoc committee that has some sort of structure about what its objectives are and what does the council want to see out of it from that stakeholder group.
No, of course, that makes sense. Thank you.
Well, I'm through with our part of it, and we're 4 minutes shy. So Mayor, I'm not sure. I don't have anything else. So I don't know if we want to fill the 4 minutes with kind of preview of tomorrow, or if we're good to go.
We can do that. Thank you very much. And thanks staff for showing up today for this, and for counselors coming today for an additional meeting this week. I appreciate everyone's time and respectful dialogue. And tomorrow we will have Gary Anderson, who has agreed to facilitate, and that will be more of a dialogue between counselors, and Adam will be there as well to sort of take this information that we've got today from staff and the priorities staff has in their timelines, and then meld those together with our own specific goals, and then hopefully come out of that, or I should say hopefully, but it is hoped we will come out of that with sort of game plan going ahead for at least the next year. And I think I state that correctly, and just want to introduce everybody to Gary. Gary, hello. Did you have anything you want to say to us before we wrap up in preparation for tomorrow?
All I can say is I'm glad that I was able to sit in on these sessions, because I've got 5 pages of notes, and looking at, nobody mentioned that one. We're going to have to add that one, but that one's already pretty much underway. So maybe we can remove that one. So the combination of the 2 meetings, going through what's already underway and all of the planning that's already being done with our meeting tomorrow night, I think it's going to be a great 2-day session.
Thank you very much. All right. Well, if no one else has anything further, I think we'll release everybody to go off to their evening. Thanks so much, and we'll see you tomorrow. All right. Good night, all.